So little steps, big blessings. I remember we were standing in pastor's office and we were talking, and she says, "Who's going to speak Sunday? Do you want to speak Sunday?" I said, "Sure, I'll speak Sunday." And she said, "Well, what's the title going to be?" So I had this book in my hand, and I had been reading this book, and it was talking about finding your purpose in God, through God, and God showing you what your purpose is. And I flipped through the book, and I saw the title says, "Little Steps, Big Blessings." So it's okay, yeah, I've read that part. Let me go ahead and talk about that. So, but it has a lot more deeper meaning than, especially what that one author said. And so I started to look in preparing the sermon, and I said, I wanted to know exactly how many times does the word bless or blessing or blessed, how many times is that talked about in the Bible? And it says it's talked about in the Bible, it's mentioned in the Bible 400 times. And so, looking at that, I believe that if we understand how to receive God's blessings into our lives and how to give to others out of what we have received, we will become the means of a prosperous community and touching many people's lives for God. And last night I was, Lord, that didn't let me sleep. 4:30 this morning.
Welcome to my every Sunday.
So God was working with me and throwing things around in my head. And one of the things he talked about was he said the playbook of life. I'm sure we've heard that term before. And I'm going to get to that, but the first thing I want to know, so I like interactive communication. So do you agree that blessings can be associated with protection and happiness?
Absolutely.
Do you also agree that God's blessings protect us? They help guide us to the path of righteousness and happiness?
Yes.
So if you believe that, then the question becomes, how do we as individuals, as a community, and as a church body position ourselves to receive the blessings that God has in store for us? So let's look at reading number one. In reading number one, it talked about earthly treasures that we have received and identified as blessings from God. We all want to live blessed lives and experience the promises of God's blessings. We want to live where we are free from sickness and disease. Our relationships are thriving. We have money, and we're not struggling for money. Our debts are paid. And most of all, we want to be a blessing to others. But many of us struggle with how to take hold of that. And as I was thinking through this, I was thinking to myself, I said, is that house that I get really the blessing? Is that car that I have really the blessing? Or is it the fact that God woke me up this morning and gave me a plan on how to get to that house and get to that car? Is that the blessing?
Yes.
I think that's the blessing.
Yes.
Everything that we do is a step in the progression to the results of God's blessings. The mere fact that we are here today is a step in the progression to receiving God's blessings.
Amen.
So we say little steps, big blessings. Matthew 6 chapter 31-33 tells us we don't have to be anxious. We don't have to ask about what you're going to eat. You're going to have to ask about what you're going to drink. You don't even have to talk about what you're going to wear, because guess what? God already knew that you needed those things. And God said, all you have to do is seek me first, and I will give you the desires of your heart. I will give you all of those things. But that's where many of us struggle. Sometimes we don't put God first in the things that we do. We we get down the road and we do things and we come back around to God and say, well, yeah, I messed up, God. Can you help me now? Amen. So what does all these things have to do with the topic, little step, big blessing? So I was reading a story, and it talked about this 18-year-old young man who knew that God had called him to preach. But he didn't have a church. He went out on the street corners and he preached. Every day he went out there. He had 10 to 20 people in his audience every day. But you know, every time you're doing God's work, something comes into the midst. The devil wants to shut you down. He wants to stop you. So one day this young man was out there preaching, and there was this big old guy over there staring at him from across the street because he wanted him to start preaching. And the guy walked over to him. He had his hands in his pocket, and he gets in his face and he says, "If you don't stop preaching, I'm going to shoot you." But the young man, he knew that God had told him that this is what his purpose was, and this is what he was supposed to do. So what did he do? He closed his eyes, and he said, "God, you put me here. You told me that you wanted to preach. I never realized that I was going to be on the street corners of Atlanta in the 1960s preaching your word. But I'm here preaching your word. And if I perish today, Lord, if I perish today, I'm going to perish doing your will." And the young man continued to preach and do what God asked him to do. And as he was preaching, and as he kept praying to God, he got stronger and stronger in his belief and his faith. And he started to preach even louder. And the man walked over to him and looked down on him. He was mad and he was irritated. But he just turned and he walked away. Sometimes in our life, that's what we have to do if we want God to continue to bless us. For that young man, that was a little step. And he continued to do what God told him to do over the next several years. And as he continued to do God's work and God continued to bless him, he ended up with a mega church. And he ended up with a large platform. I'm not saying that you're going to end up with a mansion sitting on a hill. I'm not saying that you're going to end up driving a limousine. But I'm saying as you continue to bless, to believe in what God has in store for you and put God first, everything that you do will prosper. You will grow and you will develop in your relationship with God and you become a blessing to your community. So that takes us to I'm looking at our theme for this year, a year of growth. I'm looking at our theme for this year, a year of growth. We can throw that theme out there and say it's a year of growth, but if we don't do anything about that theme, nothing's going to happen. Everything we do has to have a plan. And so how do we get there? What does all this mean? It means that first, we have to realize that God is the source of all of our blessings. We have to have a deep conversation with God and ask God to lead us and guide us in the things that we want. God, I want that house, but I can't just go out there and get that house. I have to have a plan. So God, if you bless me to get up out of the bed this morning, I'm going to get in that newspaper and I'm going to look for a job. And if you bless me with that job, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give back. I'm going to give back to you. And then after that, Lord, then I'm going to go ahead and save some of my money so I can get this house that I talked to you about. But I can't do that without you. And that takes us to our second step. So there are 6 steps in this method to madness that I found, and there are 6 steps to it. But it all makes sense. It all comes together in the end. Realizing that the choice to be blessed is yours. It's yours. All you have to do is ask. Ask God and God will bless you. But at the same time, it's like that playbook of life I was talking about. there's a captain on every team, and God's the captain of the team. And when you ask God for something and he tells you to go this way, he doesn't mean go that way. Because if you go that way, whatever was over here for you ain't on that road, and you're not going to get it.
Amen.
So you have to realize that the choice to be blessed is yours. You can be blessed, or you can, because on that road over there might be a pothole. And you might not see that pothole. And guess what? That hole might be a sinkhole. And then you're in that sinkhole. And guess what you're going to do? Oh, God, I went down this road. You told me not to go. I'm sorry. I was hard-headed. Can you get me out? Can you throw me a rope? Can you help? Can you throw me a rope and pull me out of this hole? But guess what? God is a loving and forgiving God. He's going to pull you out of that hole. As many times as you ask God, God's going to pull you out of that hole. And you're going to get a chance to start all over again. And the next step, number 3 says, realize that fearing the Lord leads to blessings. Has God ever whipped you?
Oh, yeah.
God has whipped me so bad at times, I didn't even think I was going to recover. I thought I was going to have blisters on my butt for the rest of my life. I was so hard-headed. I remember I was all this thing that I like to do. I used to like to go to the casino. I'm just like everybody else. I used to like to go to the casino. But I would go in there. But before I went, God would say, I'm serious, as clear as day. Say, don't you go there. You don't need to go there. I'm like, but God, there's people there and I can laugh and talk to them. You know, I can sit there and I can have a beer with them, and, you know, and I can have fun with them. And God said, don't go there. But I went anyway. And I came out with my head down, no money in my pocket. It's like, oh, Lord, I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have went in that casino, because if I hadn't gone in there, I still have my money in my pocket. But I was hard-headed. And God whooped me for that. He really did. God did. I mean, I'm working on that gender neutral thing. God whooped me for that.
I'll whoop again.
That's an old Baptist in me. I gotta work on that. But I do have different beliefs about God too. So the next step is realizing that delighting in God's commandments leads to blessings. Y'all know I get up here and I sing my heart out. Sometimes I sing at the top of my lungs. I don't even have a microphone. And sometimes poor Whit, he be sitting there with his hands in his ears because I'm singing so loud. But I'm so happy.
Amen.
But you know what? I'll be so happy and I'm so overjoyed
Be
that
alone
God
happy.
has delivered me and changed me and put me on the path, and I'm doing the things that God would have me to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how any other way to show that joy except for come here and sing and praise and just have a hallelujah good time. And sometimes the songs we don't sing don't be all that, but I'm still happy. And so that takes us to our next one. Number 5. Realize that God's commands are there to bless you. How many times have you ever known God to tell you to go down the wrong road and get in trouble and end up in jail and whatever? God, that's not God. God is going to tell you, put you on the right road to do the right thing. And even though, so I was thinking about how the football team goes. We're talking about the playbook of life, and football teams, everything has a captain. And I was thinking about that. And the football, the quarterback tells the players where to go. So, tight end, you gonna run over here or whatever. I don't know all the terms. Michelle taught me about football. I was watching. I didn't know all the terminologies, but I was watching. And I learned a little bit more as you're gonna get better and better at it. So the quarterback has this play, and the play says, I'm gonna fake the ball to you, and you're gonna run up the middle, and you might not get but 2 or 3 yards, but that's the play. So what happens if that's the play, and that position, that guard, that tight end, wide receiver decides, oh, I'm going for the Hail Mary. You got to throw it all the way down so I can catch it all the way down here. And he misses it. But he's not gonna get the ball because that wasn't the play. And God's the same way. If God tells you to take one step, because I'm working you up to this big blessing that I have in store for you, and you take more than one step, you miss the sequence in the play. And you might not get, you're going to get there, but it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. So God commands you so that you can be blessed. But you got to trust and believe and stay on the path. And a lot of times we don't do that. We have our type A personalities. Oh God, I'm making this plan myself. I'm going over here. I see this big red car over here. I want that car. That car costs $2,000, but I know I'm going to have that much money to make those payments. But I'm going to get that car because I want that car, God. And what do? You get that car, and the next thing you know, you can't pay your house note. You can't pay your utilities. Because God didn't tell you to get that car. God told you to get that Volkswagen. But you want to do what you want to do anyway. But God is not going to command you to do things that are not going to result in a blessing for you. Number 6, realize that God loves you and wants you blessed. There's another slide up there, I believe. If your destination is being guided by God, by God's will, then you will be blessed in everything your hands find to do. Everything. And I use this, you can go to the next slide. I use this church as an example.
Or just the roof.
Well, with the roof as an example. We have the roof. We don't have the whole church. But the founders of this church, and some of which are still here today, they had a vision. God gave them a vision, and God gave them a plan. And said, I want you to build a church. I want you to build a church of love. I want you to build a church of acceptance. I want you to build a church that's open to everybody. Amen. And with that, and that plan was there, and they followed that plan. And that's why Trinity MCC Gainesville is here today, because they followed the plan of God. They laid the platform, the concrete. They put up the beams. Somebody else had the ability to do the electrical work. Everybody came together in God's plan and made this organization so that people like me coming from up in D.C. could come down here and walk in the door and feel loved by everybody in here. That is an awesome experience. But guess what? We can't leave that love inside of these walls. That love needs to go out in the streets so that we can show everybody that God wants us to grow. God wants us to grow. And then as we grow, we have to give more to God. Because God has blessed us, and we have to return some of that back to God to say, yes, I trusted you. I believed in you. I followed your commandments. I didn't go down the wrong way, and I stayed the course, and you landed me on my feet, and I am forever blessed. Amen. And that's the same thing about our vision of growth. We can't grow if we rely on growth right here inside of the walls of Trinity MCC. We have to go outside the walls of Trinity MCC. And we have a generous donor that's willing to bless us, but if we don't put the work in to match the funds to get to where we need to be so we can do the surveys and we can lay the groundwork and we can build the structure and we can bring more people to God. Because that's our purpose. Bring in more people to God. And so God put this on my heart. I straight out that script. I don't know what happened to the script. I just know that God asked me to share the thoughts of blessings and how we're blessed and how we should be a blessing to others and how we should be a blessing to our own organization, our own church, our own mission, our own ministry, and and do the things that God wants us to do. And more than anything, stay on the path. Little steps, big blessings.
Sandra, thank you. What a blessing. And you did my job. So it is time to share your blessings with God and this church so that we can share our blessings here at Trinity among the community and the world. Now, there's several ways to do this. You can put a penny or $1 or $100, whatever, in the offering book. You can go online and set up giving weekly, bi-weekly, monthly to come straight to the church. So you don't even have to think about it. It's just done. Wishing it doesn't make it happen. We have a budget that our finance committee came up with to keep this church going and helping us to do the work. And that finance budget is over $1,700 a week. $2,000 a week. And you know what? It doesn't fall off of trees. It comes from our hard work. Okay? Our hard work in fundraising, in giving, in having ideas. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you to reach deep in your pockets. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a penny. If it's a penny, God's going to make that penny grow. So if you will rise as you're able and join me in singing Blessed Assurance. And as we do this, our ushers are going to pass the plate. And by passing the plate, I mean pass it back and forth down the rows. Okay? Please join with me as we sing.